This video is about the nervous system, the brain, spinal cord, and the senses. That's the CNS, the central nervous system category, consists of the brain and spinal cord. The PNS, or peripheral nervous system, can be broken down into two categories, somatic and autonomic. The somatic part are your senses. The autonomic part are things that you don't control, but it's how your body adjusts to its environment. The autonomic part is broken down into two categories, sympathetic, that is your fight or flight responses, or parasympathetic, that is your rest and digest responses. So if you're in a stressful situation, pupils dilate, heart rate, breathing rate increase, that's your sympathetic nervous system. After the stressful situation, as you're calming down again, that's your parasympathetic nervous system. Now those you can't control. Let's take a look at your central nervous system. It consists of your brain and spinal cord. Your brain is well protected, and it needs to be. It's protected by bone, the bones of the skull, cerebral spinal fluid, so that the brain itself is suspended in a fluid. This is helpful whenever your head gets bumped. Your brain is going to move around in there, but it takes a lot for the brain to slam against the side of your skull. Also, the weight of the brain is enough to start to crush some of the structures in the lower brain. So suspending in fluid allows the brain to function properly without damaging those lower brain structures. Meninges are kind of like a saran wrap, a shrink wrap around your brain. They also protect your brain. And then the blood-brain barrier blocks blood from directly contacting the brain. So blood is going to exchange gases and nutrients with the cerebral spinal fluid, but not directly contact your brain. The good news about this is things that infect your blood, like a cold or the flu, don't also infect your brain. In fact, it's very difficult to get a viral or bacterial infection in your brain. The cerebrum is the highest part of your brain. It's highest in location as well as in function. And the cerebrum is divided into different areas. These different areas have different jobs. But there are sections of your cerebrum that are sensory, some are motor, some are association. The sensory parts of your cerebrum will help you decipher not just what you're feeling, but what you think about what you're feeling. The motor parts are helping you coordinate your movement, remember movement, and large parts of your brain are dedicated to the sensory and motor functions. Association is an idea of like, how do you think about those things? You see something, what do you think about it? The frontal part of your cerebrum deals a lot with your planning, with your abstract thought, like your ability to think about yourself, thinking about yourself, and even your consciousness, the conscious part of your brain. The cerebrum is divided into two major hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. And it's divided right down the middle by this deep longitudinal fissure. So it's connected at the base of that fissure by something called the corpus callosum. Now the cerebrum has a cortex and a medulla. The gray matter is unmyelinated nerves. The white matter are myelinated nerves. The gray matter makes up the cortex and the white matter makes up the medulla, the inner part of the brain. The cerebrum is divided into these four major lobes: frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe. And these lobes correspond to the bones of your skull: frontal bone, temporal bone, parietal bone, occipital bone. The cerebrum is also divided into jobs that it does. So the occipital lobe has a job of interpreting things that you see. The primary motor cortex controls voluntary movements. So as you are thinking about moving and putting your body in a certain position, that's the primary motor cortex. The premotor cortex controls motor skills and repetitive movements. So we sometimes say, well, it's muscle memory, but that's your premotor cortex. So tying your shoes, you don't normally have to think about it anymore. Playing the piano, you don't have to think about your finger positioning. That's because of the premotor cortex storing that information. The somatosensory area deals with sensing things. So the visual area is dedicated to vision, olfactory to smelling, auditory to hearing, gustatory to tasting. Somatosensory areas of the brain deal with your senses. So the visual area deals with vision, olfactory with smelling, auditory with hearing, gustatory with tasting, and your primary somatosensory area deals with touch. Notice your somatosensory area is this orange band. So that's where your part of your brain that's dedicated to interpreting senses. Now, some areas of your body are more sensitive than others, and so those areas have more brain mass dedicated to them in the somatosensory area. So for example, a large portion of the somatosensory area is dedicated to, let's say, your tongue, because your tongue is very sensitive. But there's also a large part of your primary motor cortex dedicated to your tongue, because your tongue is controlled by muscles and there's a lot of fine motor control. Other areas of your body, like your hands, are also sensitive with lots of control. But some areas, like your elbow, there's not much part of the brain dedicated to your elbow's sensing or to your motor control of your elbow. The primary motor area deals a lot with voluntary movement and with speech, like forming words. The premotor cortex with learned motor skills and planned movement. So you're trying to plan how to merge into traffic or try to plan how to walk around a person. That's your premotor cortex. The association areas deal with how do you think about these things. So you feel a touch, that's somatosensory, but then what do you think about that touch? Is it pleasurable? Is it painful? You see shapes, but do you recognize that's the shape of your car? You hear a sound. Is it a sound you enjoy, or is it a sound you don't like? The prefrontal cortex has to do with reasoning, planning, abstract thought. So what are you doing 2 weeks from now? How do you figure out a logic problem? That's your prefrontal cortex. So here again is a image of your brain. Notice the cerebrum, this bright yellow part. Below the cerebrum is the cerebellum. It's a bright yellow structure located in the back of the brain. The cerebellum has a lot to do with balance and coordination. So if you're a ballerina and you move through life gracefully, you can thank your cerebellum. And a lot of practice, I'm sure. The cerebellum also helps to maintain equilibrium and posture. This is why if a person gets smacked really hard on the back of their head, sometimes their posture just collapses as they lose consciousness. And that's because the cerebellum is in charge of keeping those muscles slightly contracted to maintain your posture. The cerebellum also compares and then predicts movement. So if you're watching your yoga instructor, you see the position of their body and you're trying to compare it to your body. Well, it's the cerebellum that's analyzing that. Another example of that would be just raising your hands and trying to touch your middle fingers over your head. The second time you do it, you'll probably find that it's way more accurate than the first time because your cerebellum will correct the mistakes that you made the first time around. The corpus callosum helps join the two hemispheres of the cerebrum, the right and left hemisphere. The thalamus acts kind of like a relay station, or you might think of it kind of like a phone menu. When you call into a company and they say, press 1 for this department, or 2 for that department, or 3 for a different department, the thalamus takes information from the spine, from the body, and then makes sure it gets to the right places in the brain. It also helps to direct some motor activity. and it's involved with memory. The hypothalamus sits just below the thalamus, and it's in charge of things like emotion. It's also in charge of most of the body's homeostasis, heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate, your temperature, your biorhythms, like when do you wake up or feel sleepy, when do you feel hungry. Those are biorhythms. It also has this main job of controlling the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the master gland. It controls many other endocrine glands. So the hypothalamus plays a major control in regulating the homeostasis of the body. The midbrain responds to reflexes and sights and sounds. That loud sound might cause you to look. Or if a cell phone goes off, you almost have to look. Well, that's your midbrain just reacting to those sounds. The medulla is the bottom of the brainstem. The medulla is an autonomic center. So this is where things like breathing happen without thinking about it. It also affects the force of your heartbeat. Things like breathing, so you don't have to think about breathing. The force of your heart rate, your blood pressure. And it includes the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system is a filter for your brain. So all this stimulus is coming in from all sides. The reticular activating system tunes things in or tunes things out. So if you are watching TV while you're doing your homework, it can tune out the TV. Until you hear something that you're interested in, then it tunes it in. The pons is another part of the brainstem. The pons connects the cranial nerves. So there's 12 cranial nerves that leave the pons and go into your head and face and neck. It also assists the medulla in breathing. The limbic system isn't just one part of your brain, it's a cluster of brain structures, but they're all involved in emotion and memory. That includes long-term memory and short-term memory. Notice the olfactory bulb, that smell. Smell is hardwired into memory. So sometimes smells trigger memories when nothing else will trigger a memory. The spinal cord leads up from the body into the brainstem. So it's going to take those messages from the brain to the body or from the body to the brain. It also acts as a reflex center. So if you touch something hot, that sensory neuron carries it to the spinal cord and then back to the muscle to remove your finger before you even feel the pain, before you even think about the fact that you're hurt. So here's an example of a reflex. You touch something sharp and your finger's already moving away before you recognize that you touched it. Let's look at the special senses. You have all kinds of receptors in your body that are collecting information. Mechanoreceptors are mechanical, so they're going to interpret things like pressure. Thermoreceptors detect temperature changes. Photo for light. Chemical chemoreceptors. And then you have pain receptors that detect pain. So you feel some pressure. So long as the pressure doesn't reach a certain threshold, you just feel it as pressure. But as that pressure increases, at some point it's going to cross the threshold, and instead of feeling pressure, you just feel pain. Similarly with temperature. The temperature gets warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer. At some point, you just feel pain. Same thing with bright lights, it's just painful. Or strong chemicals, it's just painful. So once it gets outside that range, you just feel pain. So some of the general senses that we have include things like touch, pressure, vibration. We have nerves that pick up those things. Temperature. Now, temperature is a sense that adapts rapidly. In other words, you get into a hot tub, it's 140 degrees in there, but it doesn't take long before you adapt to that, and it just feels nice. Smell also adapts rapidly. You walk out onto a farm and you smell manure and it's terrible, but a few minutes later you don't even notice anymore. Golgi tendon organs detect body position. So how do you know your arm is at 45 degrees? What's the Golgi tendon organ? You go to touch your toes. How do you know your muscles are stretching? Well, it's your Golgi tendon organ. If you stretch them beyond what's comfortable, then you start to feel pain. Pain is a little difficult to detect, and that's because the nerve pathway that your pain receptors use are also shared by other nerves. So you might feel a pain shooting down your left arm, but it's really your heart. And the reason is those two nerves converge and the message is sent up this nerve, and it's hard for your body to determine, is that pain coming from my arm or my heart? So again, you might have lung pain, but you're feeling it here in your neck and trapezius because those nerve pathways are being shared. Sight is one of our favorite senses. If you take a look at this eye, you'll see some of the common structures. Notice that light has to pass through the cornea, and then there's going to be some fluid into this opening that we call the pupil, past the lens, and then through some more fluid and to the back of the eye where the optic nerve can collect that information. On the back of the eye are rods and cones. Rods are really good at detecting light. Cones are really good at detecting color. When you eat carrots, and we talk about carrots improving your vision, what they do is they improve the rods. So you're not going to get better vision by eating carrots, but it's going to help repair some light sensitivity that you might have. Whether or not you see 20/20 or 20/50, that's based on the shape of your eye. As you get older, or from genetics, the shape of your eye changes, and as it changes shape, like it either gets like kind of squished or kind of flat, that makes it so that when light passes through the lens and it doesn't quite focus on the retina, like it doesn't quite land correctly on the retina, and so it looks blurry. Corrective lenses help to take that image and land that image onto the retina so that you can see it well. Now, when we look at something like this, our eyes are going to see it correctly. Our brain is not going to interpret it correctly. Our brain is just lazy, so it's going to look at the two lines and automatically say, oh, the blue line's longer, because it's falling for this trick of just taking the easiest method of interpretation. Your eyes are seeing it right, but your brain's not interpreting it right. But really, it's like that for any image like this. The outer ear acts kind of like a funnel. So it catches sound waves and channels them into the ear canal. The outer ear is called the pinna, and it channels those sound waves into the ear canal. Those sound waves then cause the eardrum to start to vibrate. That vibration is picked up by three of the smallest bones in the body, the malleus, incus, and stapes. That vibration is transmitted to those bones to the semicircular canals in the cochlea. It's the semicircular canals in the cochlea that are going to take those vibrations and send them down the auditory nerve to the brain to be interpreted. The semicircular canals are also responsible for balance. So there's fluid in those canals that help you determine whether you're upright or spinning and recognize your body position. You have several major taste buds types concentrated in different areas on your tongue. The sweet taste buds are concentrated on the tip, but they are also located other places. Next comes salty, then sour. Umami is kind of a meaty flavor, and bitter in the back. Now, this map does provide us with some interesting information. With the tip of our tongue, if we taste sweetness, then it sends a signal, lots of calories, eat up. If we taste saltiness in a similar way, we tend to crave it because it's a thing our body often needs. But sour and bitter are located closer to the back of our tongue because if food is unpalatable or if it's unsafe to eat, it's a lot of times the sour and bitter that give us that gag reflex to tell us spit this stuff out. It's inedible. So that helps you better understand some things about the brain and about the special senses.